All right, everybody, what's up? It is, Tuesday, Feb 11. Jerome Powell. How I don't want to talk about this guy, but I got to talk about this guy. Now, I know if you've been following my videos for any length of time, you know how I feel about this guy. I mean, he's in way over his head. First of all, Powell he's not an economist. He's a securities attorney. He's a securities lawyer. You know, all these things, this Fed board, these are political appointments. I mean, these people aren't necessarily that informed. I mean, these are political appointments. But and I said this, he is the worst by far. Remember back last year when he was like knocking MMT and he just basically dismissed it out of hand, but today really was something else. I mean, it was something else. I don't know how else to phrase it. He testified before Congress, and here's what he said. He said, you gotta cut spending. You gotta reduce the deficit so the government has enough policy space for when the next downturn comes. I couldn't believe my ears. Like, really? Seriously? You got to cut spending in a 2% GDP economy where the Fed isn't even able to, raise their inflation target or meet their inflation target? Like, this is something that macroeconomics 101. A first-year economics student in college would understand you can express GDP as an equation. Very simple equation. There's 4 ingredients. It's like making a recipe. GDP equals everything that all the consumption of household consumption, everything that you and me and everybody else spends money on, everything that the government spends money on and invests in, everything that businesses invest and spends money on, and then net exports, which are exports minus imports. And for the United States, that's pretty much always negative because we run trade deficits all the time. So that's a subtraction. So let's say, for example, just to give you a very simple example, let's say consumption is 1 and government spending is 1, so that's 1 plus 1 is 2, and business investment is 1, so that's 3. And we have a trade deficit of -1. So that's 3 minus 1 is 2. So GDP is 2. Okay? Now what Powell is saying is you got to reduce government spending to prepare for a downturn. In other words, to make the economy stronger before any economic downturn happens. So let's go through the equation again. Consumption is 1. Business investment is 1. Let's say those things don't change. Okay, so that's 2. Now, government spending, instead of being 1, in my last example, they cut it. Let's say it's 0. So now we have 2. Okay? And now we have that same trade deficit is -1. So now what's GDP? 1. It went down. So here's the guy. He's running the Fed. I mean, this is simple stuff. This is simple stuff. This is, you want to know something? And I sent this out to my subscribers. I said, we should really hope that Congress and Trump follow his recommendations because we're going to make a killing on the downside. We will make an absolute killing on the downside. And most people will get it wrong because they'll be like, yeah, they're cutting the deficit. That's going to be so bullish. That's going to be so great. This guy's unbelievable. I mean, this guy is truly unbelievable. I do not have the words to really, describe how out of touch he is. I mean, he really has zero understanding of economics. I mean, and then this idea of the government's got to cut now so it has more policy space. What's policy space? Policy space is another way of saying has the ability to spend when it needs to spend. Like it has to cut back, it has to save those dollars, right? So here again is this concept, this notion that the government which is the monopoly issuer of the US dollar. It spends in dollars, it issues dollars, but it's this concept in his mind and the minds of many people, I have to say, that the government has to get the dollars from somewhere. They come from somewhere, like China's printing them up, or they're, every household, people in this country, in their basements, they're printing up dollars. So it's this concept that the government has no dollars. It has to save whatever dollars it has on hand for an eventual economic downturn, and then it could spend, or it has to cut back. So it's the analogy, once again, of government as a household. Apples and oranges. You can't make that analogy. It's the wrong comparison. It's inapplicable. But here he is, and he's not really challenged. That's the other thing. He's not really challenged on these statements. He's not challenged at all why should we expect that he would be? Because they're clueless too. I mean, those people in Congress are clueless too. They don't know what they're doing. They have the same notions. I mean, I made a video several months ago when we had a big MMT guy, in a congressional hearing, and he made some points, and then one of these congressmen said, hey, my family has to balance the budget. We have to balance our budget on the kitchen table, and this and that. This analogy, like we gotta save, and so the government has to save. Don't you understand that? Well, the MMT guy had no real. He chose not to respond, which I thought was very, very weak. But anyway, that's what we had today. So Powell's saying, like, hey, the government has to cut back so that at some point down the road, it's going to have the money saved up in a little kitty to be able to spend when the economy needs. I mean, that is ludicrous. When Trump raises defense spending by 10, 50, 100 billion, where does the money come from? It's just, that's it. Congress decrees, now we're going to spend 750 billion on the military, whereas we were spending 700 billion before. And it's done. There is no necessity to create policy space, because for a country that spends in its own currency, it always has the capacity, it always has the policy space. It's not a question of, look, if we were on a gold standard, yes, that would apply. If we were spending in somebody else's currency, like if you look at the European nations, none of those countries issue their own money anymore. All right? There's no more French franc, there's no more Deutschmark, there's no more Italian lira, there's no more Greek drachma, there's no more Spanish peseta, it's the euro. They don't issue the euro, the ECB does. So they kind of have to save. I mean, that analogy of the household, it does apply somewhat to those countries. Although the ECB in recent years has been kind of functioning like a fiscal authority. But anyway, you get what I mean. The guy is, I mean, he's out of his league. He's out of his element. He's a buffoon. He's a fool. He's a clown. He's really an idiot. These are these are political appointments, so what are you going to do? Hey, we're getting very close. We're not there yet. I did send out a recommendation to sell Dow at, we were up at 29,408. I think we went to 29,415 today. Then we pulled back. That was a very good sell level. We are getting very close to that inflection point from a fiscal point of view that I've been talking about. Tax flows almost equal to spending flows. In other words, the increase in the tax flows, that's income getting sucked out of the economy, right, is almost equal to the increase in the spending flows. That's what the government's spending and sending income into the economy. So like spending flows are up 85 billion over last year. Tax flows are up 70 billion over last year. So there's a very small positive flow of 15 billion. Last year at this time, that positive flow was 120 billion. And here's the important part. The growth rate of those tax flows is accelerating faster than the spending flows. So at some point, the tax flows, that sucking sound of income coming out, we're going to hit that inflection point, and that's going to be, and by the way, that's going to be, in a sense, what Powell is hoping for, right? And then we'll see what's going to happen. All right, remember, I'm the only one who has an applied approach to MMT. People are signing up at the new rate. It's worth it. I had a guy who said he already made 3 years worth of subscription on one trade that I put out there. Go to my website, pitbulleconomics.com, sign up for a 30-day free trial of MMT Trader. You gotta have it. You gotta have the understanding. Otherwise you're gonna be like Powell, and you don't want to be like Powell. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.